So I work at Vintage Grace. I've been there for about 5 years now. I did come to salvation. I came to faith there my senior year at youth group. That was cool. And I've kind of been there ever since then. I work on the adults team, and then particularly, I work in the young adult space. And so, what's up, Christian? He's in my small group. Anyways, I work in the young adult space, and there are two things that I've noticed about young adult guys as I have spent time there. I am one. So guys, 18 to 25 who come to young adults, they're there for two reasons usually. Two reasons. The first one is they are looking for a wife. Okay? They're looking, and I don't blame them because I did the same thing and I found one. Come on, somebody. The second reason sometimes, or the second thing that people do, young adults do when they come to young adults, is we have an issue with sometimes arguing in studies. Life group guys, like for our life group guy studies, when it's just guys, there's no girls, we sometimes can get stuck on controversial topics. We argue about predestination, free will. We can argue about these things and we get like stuck there. And me leading it, I'm like asking this question, why can't we just get along here? Why do we get stuck here? Why can't we just get along? And I think maybe you have asked this question, probably not of young adult guys, that'd be a little weird, but you may have asked it of your marriage. You may have asked it of your relationships, of your workplace, of the church. Why can't we just get along? Why does it seem like division is so much more common than unity? Why is that? And ultimately, that reason, right, is sin. It's pride. And I think pride says three things that are in opposition to church unity or getting along together. It says, pride says the first thing, do whatever it takes to get ahead. Pride says that, similarly to our culture. It also says, I am most important. I'm most important. The last thing it says is, I deserve blank. I deserve this. I deserve this promotion. I deserve this wage. I deserve this house. I deserve. It's I-focused. But what does the way of Christ say? The way of Christ goes on to say, count others more significant than yourself. That's from Philippians 2. Or you can take it from verse 10 of Romans 12. It's like, brag about others. Outdo one another in showing honor. The second thing it says in opposition is it says God and others are actually most important to love. Jesus' great command, right? To love God and to love others. And the last thing it says is it says, I don't deserve. Like if we actually understand what we did deserve as people, we would deserve separation from God. Like, I don't know about you, but I'm a knucklehead and I make mistakes all the time. I'm kind of a train wreck. And so when I think about what I deserve as a Christian, I don't deserve God. I actually deserve separation. Like if I actually understood the gospel, it's that I don't deserve the love that he has for me. I don't deserve that. The way of Christ is in opposition to some of our culture today that is I-focused. So this question, why can't we all get along? It's only by the love of God being poured into our hearts and overflowing. Paul today is the author of Romans. He's going to be answering two kind of aspects to this question, the how and the why. How to get along is what we're going to be diving into today. But then before, he's been talking about why. Why should we even try to get along? Why should we try to get along? Let's start with that one. That's from Romans 12:1, one of my favorite verses we can meditate on for a lifetime. 12:1, therefore, by the mercies of God, present your bodies as a living sacrifice. I just want to focus for a second on mercies of God. This is the foundation of the rest of chapter 12. What is the mercies of God? The mercies of God is, the NIV says, in view of the mercies of God. And so it's saying, cast your eyes, fix your gaze on what God has done for you. Why is that? Because if we had a grasp, if we had even like half of, not even a perfect grasp, just a little bit of a grasp of the mercies of God in you and my life, your and my life, our response to the gospel would be like, of course, God. Of course you can have my life as a living sacrifice. If we actually understood the mercies, that next section is so easy. Yeah, you can have my life. I'm all in. Romans 12:1 lays this foundation for the rest of where we're going in Romans 12. Because otherwise, I think sometimes when we go through like Romans 12, we can see it as like, do this, don't do this. Do this and don't do this. It's a checklist, right? It's like, if I can do this, God will love me. I'll be the super Christian. I'll get the Jesus points. But that's not the heart of Paul at all, right? The heart of Paul here is to say, when we get a grasp of the mercies of God, from the inside out, we overpour, we overflow. And it looks like the rest of Romans 12. Romans 12 is like a target on the wall. That happens when we overflow with the love. It's what it looks like, not the white knuckle spirituality of I just need to do this, and this in order to get my way into heaven. Copy? So it's not a checklist. Give me a nod if we're like, yeah, okay, we're in there. We're with it. All right, my summary statement today is, this is fun fact, this is the first time I'm using a clicker in a sermon because it stresses me out. So just stick with me. Here we go. Summary statement, it's on the screen. Paul in Romans today unpacks how and why we relate to different people in a variety of ways for the purposes of church unity and living as examples of the love of God to the yet to believe world. Let's read it. Romans 12, 14 through 16. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. And never be wise in your own sight. All right, so we're going to start just going verse by verse and break them down as we go. Bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse. Let's start with what bless does not mean. To bless and not persecute someone does not mean to remain in a harmful situation or to remain in an abusive situation. It doesn't mean to not set boundaries. It doesn't mean to be walked all over like a doormat. That's not what that's talking about at all. In fact, Jesus, when the crowds are pursuing him in the Gospels, he's on the edge of the cliff, they want to kill him, he walks away. It doesn't mean that. Bless also in our culture today sometimes can be like, I'm so blessed. Hashtag blessed. It's on the Instagram. We show how we're blessed with the Range Rover. For me, it's with the Carhartt. Like, if I have Carhartt, I know I am blessed. Thankfully, Lily has bought me a lot of stuff like that. Okay. Lily's my fiance, by the way. We'll get there. Blessed sometimes looks like, oh, I have all this stuff. I'm blessed because I have this material accumulation. But that's not what Paul is saying here. The Greek word here, this is super cool. The Greek word here is eulogete, with a T at the end. It's where we get the word eulogy, which means to speak well of someone, usually at the end of their life at the funeral, right? So Paul really is saying here, speak well of those who persecute you. In a deeper level, humbly wish well for them. Now, this is radical when we understand persecution for them. Persecution is being thrown in a coliseum and being torn apart by lions for them. It's being lit on fire. Like, it's death. It's excruciating pain for them. So then for Paul to say, bless those who persecute you, speak well of those who persecute you, pray for those who are trying to kill you, that's a radical thing to say. Now, I think it'd be beneficial to pause here and ask the question, why would he actually say that? Think about it. Why would Paul give an instruction to bless enemies? Is it not what God did for you and for me? Is it not what God did for the Church of Rome and for Paul? This is an image of who God is. This is back to the mercies of God. Think of Jesus, right? Perfectly innocent in heaven, perfectly innocent, incarnate, lives this whole life that is perfectly innocent, wrongly convicted, flogged, spat on, mocked, delivered up to be crucified for a wrongly committed offense. And while he's hanging, says what? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Jesus, who was utmost persecuted for something that he didn't deserve, to people who he rightly, justly could have cursed. It would have been okay for that. He says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Jesus blesses his enemies in the utmost persecution. Now here's the cool part. We, as the continuation of this, are the church. We get to take this love of God that is perfectly portrayed in who Jesus is, especially hanging on the cross, and say, I get to do that too. I actually get to love people the way that God loved them. Romans talks about how we were enemies to God, right? We were enemies to God. While we were still enemies, God died for our sins. Jesus died for our sins. So Jesus, if he's willing to die for us as enemies, now we, who were enemies, and might have some other enemies, get to do the very same thing that Jesus just did. We actually get to be a continuation of the same love. That's incredible. That's actually incredible and reframes the way that we view suffering. It reframes the way that we view persecution as an opportunity. It's again focused on the mercies of God. And so this verse is technically for the yet to believe, how we engage with the yet to believe, the people who might persecute us. The next verse, though, talks about how we could engage with believers and the yet to believe. Specifically, what it looks like for the church. In 15, it says, rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. I don't know about you, but I have a hard time with this verse. I think sometimes I'm an empathetic person, but like not to that level. So for example, sometimes it's really hard for me to rejoice. Before I met Lily, my fiance, I was single, obviously. And yeah, that'd be weird. I remember like praying. I was like, okay, God, where's my wife? Like, I'm ready, man. I feel like I'm ready. Where is she? And I had this friend at the time who had a really good relationship, and they were like on the edge of proposing and getting engaged. And I remember having a really difficult time actually being happy for him because he had something that I wanted so badly. What I did was I found my life lacking when compared to his. And upon like deeper deconstruction of what was going on, I was trying to find my joy somewhere other than the person of Jesus. In the perfect person, in the marriage, in the person who I'd proposed to. I was looking for it elsewhere. Maybe you've done this. Maybe it's hard for you to rejoice with those who rejoice because someone else got a promotion. Maybe your kids didn't make the all-star team and the other families did. Sorry, that's the EDH thing. Maybe you... Wrong context. Okay. We'll just wipe that for the next sermon. Okay. Maybe you felt this way where you're like, I have a hard time actually being happy for this person because I want that. In reality, our joy is meant to be focused in the person of Christ. And actually, when someone rejoices over something that God has given them, we focus on that part, that God has given them that part. Because every victory, every good thing is from him. And so when we rejoice with those who rejoice, it doesn't just mean like, I'm happy for you, man. Good for you. Thumbs up. Romans 12:10 is like, outdo one another in showing honor. So we don't just go to their party, we host their party. We actually lift them up and brag about them because that's what God did in them. We lift them up. It's not just like a half-hearted, without heart, good job, happy for you. No, it's rejoicing with them. All right, let's talk about weeping, crying. I get really uncomfortable with this section. Here we go. We'll just go there. Anyone else like not know what to do when someone's crying in front of them? It's okay to, husbands, raise your hands. It's okay. No. When someone's crying in front of me, I'm kind of like, please stop. Please stop. I want to fix it. I want to just be away from it. I don't want to have to deal with it. But that's not the command of Christ, right? So here we go. The next 5 minutes are for me. Tune back in 5 minutes. Here we go. Let's look at Jesus first. There are two examples that I think the Bible gives us for like what it looks like to weep with those who weep. Lazarus, Martha, Mary, this story. Lazarus is Jesus' friend. And Lazarus dies, and he's been dead for 4 days. Martha and Mary are like, please come save him. And Jesus is like, nope, I'm hanging out here for another couple days, and then I'm going to come. He shows up while Lazarus has been in the grave for 4 days. And they're like, he probably stinks at this point. Like, he's probably starting to decompose. Martha and Mary greet him, and they're like, if you would have been here, my brother would still be alive. That's heavy. These are friends of Jesus. What does Jesus do? The first thing he does is he doesn't come with answers and he doesn't come with solutions. He just weeps with them. He sits with them. He feels what they're feeling. I think the second space that I see this in is in Jesus as a whole, especially in his incarnation. Jesus, we know that he is eternal with God the Father, with the Holy Spirit. He's up in heaven and not lacking anything, right? He doesn't need to come down to earth. He doesn't need to save us. He's lacking nothing. And yet he chooses to descend. He chooses to put on flesh. He chooses to become a baby who needs to get his bottom wiped, right? Like, he chooses to get his feet muddy and his hands bloody for you and for me. What does he do? He steps into our mess because we are a mess, me especially. He steps in. This is the character of God, that he constantly, consistently steps into our mess. Since the Garden of Eden, God has defined himself with this great rescue plan from Genesis to Revelation. How can I get my people back? Overflowing with this compassion. And so when we think about weeping with those who weep, this analogy has been helpful for me, but especially lodged in who Christ is. Here's the analogy. Imagine there's a pit next to me. It's, let's say, 20 feet deep. There's a pit. Someone's sitting at the bottom of the pit, one of my friends, one of your friends, whatever. There are 5 common responses that people usually have for the pit. My mom's nodding her head because she's a therapist. This is what we use for therapy. 5 common responses. 4 of them are really bad. And you might nudge the person next to you if they are like this, and that's okay. It's a learning experience. Here's the first response. To come up to the pit and say, hey, you're in a pit. That's it. The second response is this question, how'd you get in that pit? Not helpful. The third response is, I've heard this one a couple of times. It's the worst. This one irritates me more than any other. At least you're not in a volcano. Okay, the fourth response is, here's a ladder for you to climb out. This is the one that I do. When someone's crying in front of me, I'm like, I just want to fix it for them. Because oftentimes I feel like when someone's going through something, I'm like, dude, if you just did these 2 things, you'd be fine. But that's not right. That's not what I'm actually supposed to do. I'm not supposed to fix their problems. The last response is what Jesus does and what we're called to do. He says, hang on, let me climb down there with you and sit with you. When you're ready, we can talk about how to get out. Jesus sits in the pit with us. He sits in the heartbreak. He sits in the suffering. He enters our mess. It's what we get the privilege of doing with others as well, as uncomfortable as it can be sometimes. All right, so that's a hard command, but this one's harder. The next one's a little bit harder for me. Live in harmony with one another. Verse 16, live in harmony with one another. He's explaining harmony is not just being with people who are like you. It is living in unity with people who are not like you. That's what harmony is. I think a musical example is helpful. And I'm going to botch this. If you want to know more about harmony, you can talk to Zach. He's very good at it. Here's what it is. So we have melody, right? And let's say the melody goes up and down. We usually, like when they were worshiping, we're matching what they're singing for the most part. We're going to sing the same notes. It's melody. Harmony then is a different note that is happening at different intervals and matching the chord structure. This might be too complicated and weird. It's a different note that goes up and down with the melody, to simplify it. For a long time, I still can't really, to be honest, sing harmony. For a long time, I just couldn't. I couldn't hear it. And I think the reason for this is that melody is actually a lot easier to sing because someone else is already singing it. Harmony then is actually more difficult to sing. Now, similarly in the church, it's actually more hard to sing harmony, to live in harmony with people. It's a lot easier to sit in an echo chamber and just be around people who think the same thing as us. That's a lot easier. But Paul's not concerned with that. He's not calling us to that. He's saying we're supposed to live in harmony. In heaven, we're worshiping with every tribe and every nation. We are supposed to be the most diverse, most different, and yet most unified divine institution on earth. Harmony is actually different, but here's the thing. Harmony is beautiful. When people do harmony well, it changes a song. It's gorgeous. And almost every song you listen to has harmony. It would sound hollow without it. So Paul is calling us to harmony. It's beautiful. And the kicker here is that When the church does harmony well, when it does conflict well, when it does disagreements well, the world takes notice of that, right? It's very rare to see a group of people be able to disagree, to have conflict with each other, and still love each other, still carry each other's burdens. Like, that's so rare. Because it's a light, like, that is only possible with the love of God poured into our hearts, because it's what Jesus did for us. The world takes notice of this. And harmony is only possible when there's humility, which is where he goes with the later half of this. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. What he says here. Do not be haughty, but associate. Haughty is a weird word. It's just inappropriately high view of yourself. Cocky. I don't know why I'm laughing. I have a funny story after this. Okay. I love how chill Placerville is. I love that, man. It's like you just kind of come in and you're like, we're in a living room. It's sweet. Everyone knows each other. I can make mistakes. Okay, here we go. In their culture, I'm back to the sermon. In their culture, it was actually looked up to brag about yourself. So Roman Greco culture is like, it was seen as a good virtue to brag about yourself. Now, for example, if I came in and I said, look at me, I'm the 2021 cornhole champion. Come on, 2021, not 22 or 23, 2021. I might lose a ton of credibility with you as I'm bragging about myself. We don't like that. Zach is as well, just so you know. What Paul is saying here is we are not to have this high view of ourselves, but instead to associate with the lowly. Now, in young adults, we have this guy who was born with some disabilities, and he comes every single week and is the brightest light of Jesus' love, compassion, optimism, and positivity. Like when he sees you, he just hugs you, and he acts like you're his best friend every single time. It's beautiful. The point here is that each person that we engage with, each person in this room, and as we leave, bears the image of God, right? Each person, even those who irritate you, even those who disagree with you, even those who are not Christian yet, they bear the image of our Creator. So when Paul says, do not, or associate with the lowly, calling us to associate with these people, it's because we're actually missing out on joy if we don't interact with every single person, if we don't choose to see the love of God, the image of God in every single person. Now, really quickly, an application point for this, one question that you can just ask every time you interact with someone, especially the annoying people, because they're there, it's okay. Ask this question: how do I see the image of God in this person? How do I see the image of God in this person that I'm talking to? Don't ask it out loud, that'd be weird. Ask it to yourself. How do I see the image of God in this person? I promise you it'll start to change the way you treat them. Because honestly, the bad characteristics are sometimes the loudest, I know for me. And so we have to search and almost claw at, like, what is the way that God has designed this person? Look for the good in them. It's what Jesus does for you and for me. He says, yeah, he's an enemy. Jake's an enemy to me. Yes, he's a mess up and a failure and a knucklehead, but I see so much potential in him and so much value because I've created him, because he's mine. God searches for the good in me. He searches for it. Now, lastly, he says, don't be wise, never be wise in your own sight. I think knowing Paul, he was a Pharisee and he had studied the Old Testament a ton his whole life, memorizing it. I think he's pulling from Proverbs 3 here, which is really interesting. Proverbs 3, 5-8 is where this is coming from. And it's the context of saying, like, instead of trusting yourself, instead of being wise in your own sight, place your trust in God. Instead of being wise in your own sight, place your trust there. Don't sit on the throne of your heart. Let him sit there. And the point here is this, two-handed moment. I'm not good at being God. You aren't. I'm not good at being God. I'm not actually designed to be God. I mean, Lily can tell you all the ways that I mess up, right? When I choose to trust myself, when I choose to sit on the throne of my heart. So we're actually not good at being God. That's what he's saying here. Don't be wise in your own sight. Okay, recap over where we've been. This is what it looks like to overflow with the mercies of God in our hearts. This is not a checklist. It's not white knuckle spirituality. If I do this, I earn my way. No, it's constantly meditating on the mercies of God. And this is then what it looks like. It's what we're shooting for. To not be haughty, associate with the lowly. To rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. This is what it looks like. For those who are, into math, it starts with the mercies of God. Just stick with me. Come on. I'm almost done, Will. Chill. The mercies of God. Mercies of God. We've got the mercies of God. The mercies of God produce Christ-like character, right? We're saved and we're sanctified, and Holy Spirit starts to overturn tables in our hearts, really. Christ-like character then produces, if you have Christ-like character, it produces church unity. It helps us to actually get along with one another because we understand that God and I didn't get along, and yet he still forgave me, and yet he still leaned into me. So mercies of God to Christ-like character to church unity. And what does that do? It produces a light in the world. We're saved to be sent. We're saved, studying the Old Testament, the nation of Israel was always meant to be blessed, to be a blessing to the other nations. It was never meant to be a silo. It was never meant to be a holy huddle. It was always, the people of God were always meant to be a blessing to the other nations, to bring people in and say, look at my Yahweh. And so we gather on a Sunday, but again, the best part is leaving these doors, walking through the doors and engaging with people at the grocery store, asking, how can I see the image of God in this person? How can I actually ask for forgiveness constantly? Because when they see forgiveness, they see the sanctification, they see the love of God overflowing out of you. And so some implications today. Look at this clicker, come on. Implications. First one for us is this. Church unity is worth fighting for because you were worth dying for. Remember who you were before Christ saved you. Remember your eneminess to God. You were worth dying for. The church is worth fighting for. The second implication is this, is to practice searching for the image of God in every person you see this week. Just begin asking this question. How do I see it? How do I see it? Where you work, in your family, as you engage at solid ground, at the gas station, everywhere. Ask this question. The people waiting your tables, all of them. And finally, as I was praying this morning and trying to see where I wanted to go, I felt like God was asking me to just stop. I think I've been running for a long time, just sprinting, just grinding. Especially for a sermon, you kind of just I'm just gonna write it and write the slides. I made the slides last night and just running. I just feel like God's saying, stop, just pause, just be still. So what I would love for us to do is, the final implication is to meditate on the mercies of God. I want to give you guys a moment to stop. Not a California stop. We're not drifting through the stop. That's sometimes what my morning time is. I just got to get through this to get to the thing. No, full stop. If you would you close your eyes with me? Would you open your hands? You've got nowhere else to be. You have nowhere else to be. Ask this question. Let memories come up. How has God been faithful to you? Be still and know. He's with you. He's present. To be. Just pause. And as these memories come up, as you remember the way ways that God has been faithful to you. Give yourself time before you start singing as we sing this next song. When you're ready, let this gratitude and thankfulness overflow as we worship from the mercies of God in our lives. There's no rush. You've got nowhere to be.